Barry Bryan, President of Sustainable Rossmoor. Tonight, let's see if I can use it properly. No, okay, I am not using it properly. Okay, I should have it tied to something else here. How do I, okay, today's agenda. So, here, Pam, can you tell us what treats were being provided at the foyer so that we can entice the Zoomers to come out in the future? And if and where I am, then they can see you as well.
Hi, yeah, we had a pretty spread tonight. We had cookies and hummus and crackers and berries and shoes and peanut butter filled pretzels and some peanut butter cups. So yeah, you should definitely try and come to the meetings because we always have a, guess we had wine. So come next time.
Different strokes for different folks. You had me at peanut butter, but for other people, it's the wine. We're going to first have financial membership reports. Adrian is not here in San Francisco unless you unmute and I hear you on the Zoom. And then we will have John T. talk a whole bunch of follow-up things we want to talk about. Earth Day, Legislative Committee is doing great stuff, and the newsletter that you've been getting, affiliation, Marcia will say a few words about that if she is here. Carol will talk about the Walnut Creek Climate Plan that recently came out, as well as next film is, and I or Brad will say something about EV charging, and then I'll sum up. Okay, ground rules first. For the rumors here, that's O-M-E-R-S, not R-U-M. So wait for Aaron speak into this microphone, because that way people can see you, and which puts you on an equal level to the Zoomers. If and do that. For the Zoomers, please mute yourself when you're not speaking and front light yourself. So for example, I see Barry Bryan here, which screen over there has the lights beating down on it. I don't know about that, so this is, so the view of, here, come over. The view of the audience is being obscured by the light there. Maybe moving it a little bit away might enable us to deflect that. Okay, and raise your hand electronically to ask to speak. Type your question into chat, and to that point, clicked on the chat right now. Bob Hass says, everybody yourself to avoid interference. A wise man. Bob, you have to introduce yourself sometime. You've given me a lot of wise advice on email. Okay, so okay, well, actually, if you do it at an angle, that might address the problem. If you, yeah, well, anyway, we have our AV brilliant people doing this. Okay. Here, this is an example of, at the last, some of you might have experienced a 30-second outage. And during that time, I was told, we don't have Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I get it.
So I then went and downloaded the deck onto PowerPoint. And this is an example of translation error there. This was a nicely formatted slide in previously. Now it's hard to read. But basically, so our balance, we have a little $1,000, and oops, if we, I don't know if I can to see the rest of it. No, I can't. But anyway, there's about we're about, $25 richer this. Our expenses were $25 less than what we got. Trust me. Send out the slides afterwards and
supposed to take pressure Reverse
This
pressure.
one did not get affected as much. So at the end of, we had 198 active members. Now we are
Isn't that Peacock?
ended.
Yeah,
So
they're
if you
big.
haven't renewed,
But it said
you're not
fairway
getting
room.
notices.
And then last
from-
minute this afternoon, they got bumped out of.
So please
Fairway's closed.
renew. You can go to
Mute.
rossmoor.org/join
Mute.
and do it. You can join by credit card, or you can make a check pay in Rossmoor and leave it in the Sustainable Rossmoor box at Gateway. And without further ado, let's see. Our featured presenter, John
Now it's
Rossmoor,
Sleepers in
Landscape
Seattle.
Manager.
Okay, if you want, I've got
Carol,
the
do
Zoom
you
meeting
have
on for the
any
Sustainable
way of
Rossmoor.
introduction? Apparently she does, but she's also multitasking.
Actually, I don't have that much to say about John, but Tawaststjerna, how did I do? Tell me again. Tawaststjerna. Okay, Tawaststjerna. San Luis State University of San Luis Obispo, Polytech. I got the stuff, but that's because I'm dyslexic, and so you have to forgive me. Polytech State University in Obispo. How's that? I did it backwards first. And if you, and the reason you heard my phone making noise, I was just looking on YouTube if I could pull up some of the talks that he's given here. So he's been with us as our landscape manager director for over a year now, and has been giving at the GRF meetings and has had articles in the newspaper. So you can Google him to the Rossmoor News and read his articles. And I was just looking to see if you were on Golden Rain Foundation YouTube, but I don't think so. But this is going to be recorded. So people will be able to go to Sustainable Rossmoor website on YouTube and be able to listen to this in about a week or so. How many people here in the audience went first to the fairway room? Would everybody please hand? Because I'm serious. They went there first in the rain, got back in their cars and came here in the rain. And so thank you very much, Extra, for being here.
Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about modernizing landscapes, and bear with us for some of the weird slide orientation. The transfer wasn't great onto the big screen, but it'll work out. That should be better. So, the image on the screen right now comes from an organization called Rescape. The leader in the landscape industry right now. They offer a lot of talks and education sessions for people, and they have a Rescape certification for a lot of landscape contractors. Goal is to sort of promote these regenerative landscapes, and there's sort of 8 principles on the screen that fall under that. Acting low, reducing waste, nurturing the soil, reducing carbon, saving water, conserving energy, protecting water and air, and creating that. Now, I understand that the title of the presentation, Modernizing Rossmoor's Landscapes, may be confusing because some of you might take turning them into a more modern look. But what I mean by that is we're actually trying to modernize our landscapes to sort of fit principles. So out there in Rossmoor, we have many low value landscapes. And what I mean by this is there are areas in the landscape that consume more resources. It's pretty much a lot of the opposites of what we just showed on screen. Areas that water, require more maintenance, can take less carbon, create more contaminants, create more waste, and create fire dangers. Here's an example of one. I'm sure you all see this everywhere. It's pretty common across Rossmoor. We have a small strip of lawn, behind it, some oleanders and viburnum that are probably planted too close to the oleanders can grow huge, 12, 15 feet height and width. And in that spot, they're being kept smaller every year. The other thing is that lawn strip, it's not really a strip people use to gather on, right? It's non-functional. Times in these situations in Rossmoor, you'll find that the irrigation comes on together, shrub and lawn. So this is an example of something we're trying to avoid. Here's another small strip of lawn right beside a parking lot. I'm sure you could sit on this lawn, but why would you want to right beside someone's car? These are the things we're trying to avoid and get rid of. Another example, there is water use ground cover there, vinca. We have boxwood hedges, which look nice, but the maintenance staff has to come and trim those quite frequently. Standard stuff that you see in around Rossmoor, but does waste resources. Another example of a hedge. This hedge specifically is juniper. I'm sure you all know about the fire danger juniper is, so it being this close to the building, really not a smart decision to do that back in the. But I am happy to say this one specifically is no longer there. Another thing that we see all over the place here, huge ivy slopes. They, really create a habitat for rats. We end up having to track down a lot of pests in there. And a lot of the times, like the image on the right, they don't even look that great. I seem to find most often on the south-facing slopes that they. So trying to eliminate these areas that take a lot of water, and to sort of keep them looking fresh. And then lastly here, a lot of trees that were planted by the developer, most specifically on the left there, a Monterey pine, which is not suitable in the area. They are considered a fire danger. They take a lot of water. And then in the middle there, a eucalyptus, which I don't need much explaining there. And I'm not sure that one was even planted by the developer, but it was grow too big. So something that could have been taken care of a long time. And we're having to remove a lot of these trees, and we are creating waste, as you can see there. So on the flip side of things, not everything's so bleak here. We do have high value landscapes. This is an example of an area that used to be annual color and is now a shrub red. We don't have to replace the plantings every year like you do with annual. It just takes some minor maintenance, trimming them at the appropriate time of the year, and it'll flower through all summer. The medium, this is phase 1, was done before I got here actually as the landscape manager. It's starting to actually become fully grown, and the verbena's really taken off there, the purple flowered plant, and the lamandras are starting to fill in, and it's starting to look. here's an example of, where we look at the small strip of lawn and some shrubs. This is, an all way to look at it and redo our landscape. It's all drought tolerant shrubs there. And, they're all placed far enough away from the sidewalk and the other shrub to make for less maintenance. Those Lamandra grasses there, we seen them planted everywhere. They take almost no maintenance. Great. And now, this area, I point out, real proper spacing. I'm not a huge all the plant choices here, but you can see that is appropriately distanced from the other plants, and we're not having to do a lot of work to the plants trimmed off the sidewalk. Just keeping that in mind, rather than having this be a whole slope of ivy, I think this looks as attractive, if not more.
Right, it does.
And then this is an area that was done about a year and a half ago. I think the thing is great for a park area. They've almost had to do no maintenance since it was planted, and it's really starting to fill in the space well. And then I just wanted to show this image. It's an area that we just did actually ago. Well, you might think at first it's quite bare. And this is where I put my patience hat on, because we do have to be patient and let these things fill in the area. We'll often plant way too many plants up front. It will look great for the first year, but then a couple of years later, it starts like a mess, and it creates a lot of work, excess work. It's also less too if you have things spaced correctly, because you don't need to water ants, especially since we did a bubbler system here. So while that looks like mulch now, hopefully I can show a picture to you all in a year and a half, and it looks way different. So talking about things and how we want to nurture the soil, going back to that first diagram. Program here in Rossmoor, we're actually just starting to get near the end of the mulching season, because we're doing it in the late winter and early spring. We use mulch here. It's a special blend that was designed even before my time. I thank my predecessors for coming up with that. And the benefits of mulching include moisture retention, regulation, and to suppress weeds. That last one, probably the most important part, because the less weeds that are out there, the less to spray those terrible chemicals that we all don't like. Oh, I can't change this. It's all good. Thank you. So one thing that we're trying to do is to mulch all shrub beds in Rossmoor every 3 years. And there is a sample diagram here of how we break down each projects. I'm sure some of you have seen this before, where we hit zone A one year, zone B the next, and zone C the year after. That way we're mulching every single season and getting through everything in a cost-effective. And I want to talk a little bit about composting and fertilization. And composting is different than mulching. It's used beneath the soil to benefit the soil by providing essential nutrients. It's typically made up of organic materials such as leaves, shredded twigs, shredded plants, and other organic material. When I've we use STA certified compost, and it is not a dangerous environment. Fertilizing, on the other hand, plants the necessary nutrients via a natural and artificial substance containing chemical elements. Typically, the chemicals found in fertilizers are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, depending on the plant need. And excess fertilization can harm the environment. So the note here is that currently in your landscape maintenance contracts, they are required to fertilize all shrubs. And one thing that I would like to get away from is that trying to do as needed basis and composting more, because as the soil is regularly composted, it will increase the soil's fertility, needing to fertilize less. Moving on, so a newer landscape rehab technique is sheet mulching. So it's a process where sometimes it's called lasagna gardening, where actually instead of removing soil with a sod cutter, they do a process with cardboard to actually give the soil nutrients. So you lay the cardboard down on top of the lawn, a layer of compost and your mulch, and that cardboard barrier to prevent the weeds or grass from returning to the surface. The lawn, weeds, and cardboard all decompose over time, and they end up feeding the soil with more organic matter. It's great for when you have trees in a lawn area, in areas where there may be poor soil. The one difficulty seen with it is that it sometimes is hard to do near pathways and because you're adding these extra layers on top of where the existing lawn to be. So you sometimes seen some material spilling off onto the landscaping, and it's often sold as a tactic for lawn removal because there's less waste created, right? You don't have to drag all sod away. When I've gotten bids on this, I've seen it about price, but I think the benefits to the soil are enough to be doing this in a lot of places. So here's just a brief diagram of what it looks like, the different of sheet mulching. Sorry for the grainy photograph, but it starts with the soil, the turf or weeds, then a layer of compost, the cardboard down, another layer of compost, and mulch on top. So one important thing in the rehab process is choosing plants and having them correctly spaced. In Rossmoor, try to include plants that are low water use, fire resistant, deer resistant, provide texture and color in our designs. Our landscape department has several plant lists that provide a variety of options for you all. Please reach out if you ever need them. And if there's any new plant that you want to try, we're always open to it. I do have a master list that shows a lot of plants that have been tried without success. But we're always looking for newer, better plants, and natives included in that list. Plantings do need to be chosen in the correct location, so routine may not as needed. And we have to make sure that plantings are spaced from each other, depending on how they're going to be at their mature size. Crowded plants not only look ugly, but they do require more maintenance to create unhealthy plants. So here's an example, a slightly newer planted area where I think they took the spacing, plant choice, well. Everything's got room to grow. Some plants, that are the same species are a little more crowded to give it a little bit more fuller look. And I think it's got some great color. And salvia's in there, and everything is low water use. I do want to briefly talk about firescaping too in this note, and spacing. This is more so with trees, but important to note that we always want to make sure there's about 6 clearance from the ground to the lowest branches, and that if you are planting trees, you want there to be 3 times the height of that shrub to the lowest branch. This is directly from CAL FIRE's website. You can go on there. They have a great article on this. And one other image from that article showing, when we get farther feet away from the home, how much plants should be spaced away from each other. This is basically just to avoid ladder fuels. So when you're outside, things should be farther apart because it's easier for that fire to go from. This is one topic that they really hammer home in Rescape. Those are something that we don't have a lot of here, and I think they could solve a lot of our problems. They are channels designed to concentrate and convey stormwater runoff while removing and pollution. They can be vegetated, mulched, or xeriscaped. They're designed to safely maximize the amount of time water spends in, which aids the collection and removal of pollutants, silt, and debris. And here's an image that shows kind of the design of a bioswale. You can that they have planting material in around the top, a sort of in between. Underneath there is a drain with rocks and cobble to sort of filter out even more, and up that leads the stormwater water off. So this is probably what you all saw a lot out here. This is across from Terra, I believe, entry 12. And, we had a lot in ponding in this winter. I think this would be a good for an area where we could put a bioswale. So in the future, if all comes down from the hill during those first rains, we have an area where it's actually designed to catch that water and hold it for a period of time. This is one of the few bioswales we have here in Rossmoor. It's across from the 18th green of the golf course. I'm sure you all have seen it most of the time, but it is designed to sort of hold water in it for extended periods of time. Here's a picture from outside of Rossmoor. This is a small swale at Chico State University. Very simple design in an area because it's more an urban landscape around a sidewalk. And then this is a real grand, extensive bioswale. This one is actually at Cornell University, State New York. They can get really, really beautiful, these areas. So on to another topic. I'm sure you all have heard about this too in the past, but Rossmoor has a lot of combined domestic and irrigation main lines. Combined main lines make repairs very difficult and require shutdowns for even minor links at times. Areas in Rossmoor supply water to more than 30 buildings. When a repair is made, the line must be fully emptied of water in order to assure a repair. we all get Nixle alerts for water shutoffs, and you see it for mulches at a time. And I really think the mutuals need to start considering installing gates on these larger areas so we don't always need to shut off, more than 5 entries. Separating the domestic and irrigation lines, very expensive, but it's something they all should start considering doing if they can afford it. And so here's an example of one of our mainline maps that I have. This just shows domestic. It's in first, and obviously there's quite a few buildings on a meter. Off of each blue lines, there are irrigation lines too that occur, and it's rhyme or reason. So even if a small repair, at a valve that's leaking very little amount, we still have to shut down this whole area to that one valve. And if we can't find a gate valve along this whole, we have to shut down this entire thing and drain the entire line. Now, this meter specifically is down here, and it actually is uphill. So I think this is going to be a little screwed up as it didn't transfer well. Yeah, but originally each of these would be a little bit more over to the left on the diagram. So this one was supposed to be about here. This one was supposed to be in this area, over here, but my circles there are just denoting where I have a good idea to install gate valves. So if there ever is a leak, top section here, we could shut down the gate valves and only have to drain the water at the 4 or 5 buildings. It's not a perfect solution. It still helps. Part of the issue is that if there's a leak down in this area, we still will have to shut down and drain out the water for the entire, but it's progress. And, then having to every single time shut off every single building on that. For a meter and lines this size, they are special gate valves. I think it's actually 8 inches the line here, and huge steel valves. I have shut down those valves at different areas out more, and it takes a lot of work, and you sit there cranking this thing around for a while. But yeah. That we should start thinking about adding to our lines are flow meters. And these are irrigation technologies that allow us to accurately read the flow rate through a pipe. You can actually connect them to irrigation controllers. As we have here at Rossmoor, ET Water, it's compatible. The thing about these is it sends you alerts. So if it sees that a large amount of flow indicated on a specific valve, it'll shut that valve off immediately, waste any more water. It does the same thing if it sees that a valve open and just keeps running throughout the day, or if there is a line leak on the pipeline, it'll sense, hey, this has been longer than it was supposed to, and it'll shut the line off. So that's why we don't want to install these on the domestic and irrigation combined things, because that would just shut your water off in the middle of the night for no reason. But right, for the mutuals that can do this, doing irrigation only lines, and installing these flow meters will be beneficial. East Bay Mud does offer a small rebate for this, but small is better than nothing. So the last topic I want to go over is carbon sequestration. I'm sure you all know this: the capturing, removal, and storage of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. It is the key method for removing carbon atmosphere, and there are many carbon sinks on our planet, such as forests, grass, soils, oceans, and large bodies of water throughout the earth. This diagram gives a little brief rundown. It doesn't talk about photosynthesis on here, but that is one of the main ways that we sequester carbon, and our forests and oceans do a great job of that. So the amount of CO2 a plant tree can absorb depends on a few factors. It's the species, the size, your lifespan of the tree, the growth rate, or the numbers of plants and trees. First, for some reason, my nations are not working here, but I wanted to do a little to see how much it would take for us to be carbon neutral in Rossmoor. So if you look up online, the average person in the USA uses about 16 CO2 per year. That's a lot more than a lot of other countries. So I took that number and multiplied it by the population, and it gives us a good estimate of, the number of tons of CO2 that we use here in Rossmoor. It's around 1 trees will offset 1 ton of CO2 per year. And so carbon neutral, it would be close to 6 million trees planted. So I know that's a big number. We do have quite a bit of open space here. And while I don't think we could plant 6 million trees, we could get closer to it than, we'd probably like. I think that's an important thing to think about when, you're using your devices or driving your car around. So if you look up online, there's lots of recommendations that intake the most carbon. And the 10 on the screen here are all recommended. We have pretty much all of these planted here. There's very few bald cypress. Everything on the list you will find in Rossmoor. And there's a lot of reasons why we use some of the trees and don't. The green sort of X out symbols there, they indicate trees that are not low water use. Pretty much everything on there is moderate. With the blue X, the pine trees, it does depend on the type of pine. There's some low water use pines, but we don't have really any of them here. Now the red there indicates trees that are viewed as fire danger. The firs, the cypress, they're all kind of similar, and do have oils on their leaves that can create the danger. And the pines, the biggest concern there is that the that stack up underneath the trees, and the overall health of a lot of the pines here make them more susceptible to. And then lastly, we have on here the green axis, trees that take a lot of maintenance, whether it is routine pruning. I talked to my arborist about this one, and the liquid amber there, we all hate those stupid little gum balls that drop all the time, acquire sweet. The the maples in London, I have sort of the white lines because they don't often need pruning, but they do become more susceptible to disease, and anthracnose really affects those trees a lot. Pine trees, unfortunately, have the most X's there, but I think there's one to. It's obviously the oak. Low water use, little maintenance, and it resists fire very, very well. It is native. Now, these, we all love them, obviously, and we really do want to protect them. And we want to plant as many as possible going forward. So that leads me to my final point here, that tree selection obviously is really important. And each potential tree planting location needs to have a really sized tree. So therefore, in urban landscapes like Rossmoor, times it makes sense to plant a smaller tree because it better fits its surroundings. I'd love to plant oak trees everywhere, but between two Piedmont buildings put against each other doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So leads me to one of my final points, that the best way for this community to become more carbon neutral, maintaining the forests, open spaces, and planting more oak trees throughout. We have a forest management plan, which is mostly my department. It has a lot of good information, 120 pages of how to maintain our specific forests here in Rossmoor, whether that's from preventing fire to making sure the animal habitat stays full and healthy. It's a lot of good stuff in there. So I think the biggest challenge for planting these trees, especially space, is adding supplemental irrigation. But I'm pleased to let you know that the United States Forest Service is now offering grants to work. I think a lot of the funding is for urban areas and providing canopy, through urban areas. And Rossmoor's already doing a lot of good. John Walkinshaw's here. I'd like to give him a special shout out. He's planting acres at the open spaces. I think that's a really great thing, him and Adrian Roth. And that something that we're really going to need to do to intake more carbon. And I'd like to, with my crew, sort of start planting larger trees, whether we can get some supplemental irrigation there or utilize irrigators to slowly release the water around them, but little by little adding to the open space. I do have some time for questions. I don't know.
Give some instructions.
Yep.
Thank you. So Zoomers who have questions, please put it to everybody. And if you are a roomer here who wants a question, to a microphone over there, but even better, you can come up here so we can actually see that you're asking. But so we do want to at least get you captured on a microphone. So, Carol, do you have a question? Okay. Oh, go ahead.
Please comment on decorative rocks and gravel. And one of the photos that you showed fairly early was a wavy border between planting and between some white rock. I was under the impression that, well, I mean, I know the rocks don't sequester carbon, and I know they might suppress weeds, but, and of course they don't require, but I'm concerned about the heat that they retain and what they do to the top of soil as far as the microbiome or whatever that's called.
That's a great. So, for some reason, when you drive around here, you'll often see that a cobble is the sort of bigger stones that you see lining the pathways, and then oftentimes you'll see bases of trees. I have no idea why that was done in the past. Zero idea. It's something that I really want to get away from. I personally put rocks like that around the bases of trees, and something that we should try to move. The dry creek beds, they can be as sort of a bioswale type thing. I think they're good in some areas. It does have to fit the space. And the last thing I note is I wish we didn't have to line every single pathway with the norm. Unfortunately, it seems like it's the only good way to battle our problems that we have. So that's why we do it. That is the reason why we do it, is to make sure that they don't drag onto the sidewalks and make more work for the maintenance team. I wish I had a different solution. Maybe we will come up with a different solution. That is where we're at with that.
Okay, and we do have one from Mark Fellig. Actually, I see there's now 4 in the chat. Let me bring it up here. So Mark asks, are we removing eucalyptus now? And when will the stumps on the sidewalk be removed at Stanley Dollar Drive?
So in the past, I've applied for permits for eucalyptus. If it was blue gum, got those approved. The blue gum variety is the most dangerous especially with fire. It has the most oils on its bark and actually is known to sort of explode. So those were always easy permits to obtain. It doesn't always seem like we get permits for eucalyptus. I'm hoping with what has happened that will change. They're an species of tree, and there's more than, I think, 150 different types in California, and they really are just large weeds, essentially, for the most part. There's a few species that, are considered a little bit more rare. Yes, I would like to try to remove as many eucalyptus as possible, granting the cities. But the second half of that question, there are lawyers looking at that tree right now and arborists that are hired, so I can't really say anything more.
Well, thank you. I loved everything that you said, but most of all, what you said about trees. Question is about the oak trees at Dollar Park and the ones that have all the trenches dug around them, and what's going to happen to them. Will they be covered again or sort of graded in a different way?
So the valley oaks that still have the biggest trenches around them, those ones we intend to sort of grade away as best as possible, and it's strange, but to build a sort of fence around them that people aren't driving golf carts or anything else into the air to get the ground down more around them. There are 2 other trees that have the cavities still. The rest of them we already smoothed out and added some mulch at the base of the trunks. But there's one in particular that has the rot at the base, and you can see that when you look down into the hole. It wasn't previously, you couldn't see it until we did the air spading. That one, unfortunately, when a tree has that much rot, there's no recovering it. So we compact that one back and sort of monitor that tree until its health condition worsens. The final one is close to the garbage enclosure as a whole. I would like to try to move that garbage. It's a task than I would like. but we do want to sort of preserve that tree. It has no signs of rot. It's still healthy, so we want to try to remove the soil away from that one.
Okay, and then so Joe Felcher has a question about how the breakdown of those 14 carbon per year or 16 was generated. Joe, I'm gonna, if you email, I will send you an answer to that, because that's more general question that we can get. That's not utilizing John. Right, that's not utilizing John's expertise. So the next question, Patty Harrington, can the oak seedlings that are plentiful for oak trees, many on Terra Granada between entry 6 and 18, be planted by volunteers or your staff? Mark.
Yes, and I haven't figured out the best way to do this. Um, I don't know what I can and can't do yet, but it would be awesome if we could have a day and do something like this. Now, the hard thing is that you do have to, right? And you know, I I can't be enough staff to be able to water 500 saplings every single day. I really need to sit down and see what capacity we could handle, and can go from there. But I highly recommend trying to grow a sapling in a pot yard. It's a pretty cool little thing to do.
Let me give a partial answer to that. So Simon's, whose first name? uh, Bob Simmons, thank you. He champions planting of oaks and water in the on the ledge. We've been helping with that. So and it was a gallon every like month or so. But he has a lot of experience and knows what the yield rates are depending on how much you water it. So I'll connect you two up so that you can get a better idea. We did have when we had that that overabundance or bumper crop of acorns, we did have a number of people planting them. There was some organization there. It was before you were here, but we can, again, there's some expertise here to share on that. Okay, next, Karen. I know, but we're asking for people to come. Otherwise, the Zoomers, well, I'm happy if you want to write down your question. Excuse me, let me answer your yeah, you're going to, yes, you're going to ask a question in a second. But for those of you who are either unwilling or unable to come up to ask the question, we're doing this so that others can hear and see you. It's not that we don't want you to ask your question there. Able to write down your question and we will ask the question. We don't want to avoid people's questions, but we do want the Zoomers to be participants in this. That's why we're, okay, please, Karen.
Anyway, yeah, I loved your presentation, and I love the idea for Rossmoor. And you didn't deal with one issue that close to my heart, and it's pesticide usage, because I don't like pesticides. I consider them poisons. They poison our dogs, they grandchildren, they poison us. And if you want to create habitat, will destroy bees and I don't know what, get what's destroying the monarch butterflies. But essentially, Rebecca Pollen did actually try to reduce pesticides. And I don't know how many pounds, because I know you're required to report the pounds of pesticides. Year, is it? Every year. And I'm not following it now. So what pesticides do you use, and can use the usage if they are being used, which I assume they are?
Yes, general herbicides are still used here in Ross. It depends on the mutual or project that whether what type is used, organic or non-organic. Your board that makes that decision based on what can do use here. The why I have not switched is because it is more expensive to do that. Really, one of the main reasons of the mulching program is so we have less. Right now, I see that as the best path forward. If you want your mutual to switch over to, it's something that you need to talk to your board about and make clear to them that it's worthwhile. I think cost, unfortunately, has been the thing that has deterred. The other deterrence is that the organic chemicals are not as effective. But if we continue mulching, it's going to be a lot better, and we're going to have to use less. Numbers on how much we actually use right now this year in front of me, but it is something that I'll have to gather at some point this year.
Well, John, thank you. It's a very good presentation. I want to add something about the irrigation problem, and I also have a small questions. Problem was the commingle of domestic water and the irrigation line. Besides what John's already talked about, when you have a leak, you have to drain the whole thing and all that. It's actually a very high risk, health risk, the having the two lines combined. Now, soon after Mutual 1 and 2 were developed, the state of California and I think most of the other states changed its plumbing code, requiring the separation of the so that the backflow preventers can be installed on the irrigation lines. Right now, what we have is backflow preventers. We have a backflow East Bay mud installed at the beginning before it comes into. So anything we have a problem will never flow into East Bay mud's main line. But whenever, especially when we have a system, when the main line breaks, and after you fix it and you turn it back on, there's a big, surge. The water, it sucks up the chemicals, the pesticides, fertilizer, whatever it is, from the ground where the irrigation heads are. So it sucks up all into the water supply line. So it gets mixed in a water supply. And I sometimes wonder, this last couple of years, number of health issues, pretty serious health issues, and some of them could have been the problem caused by this kind of problem. So this is a very serious business. So if you live in one that do not have backflow preventers, I urge you to your boards to have a long-term capital improvement that's gradually, year by year, separate these two lines, so that, because this is really a major health issue. So that's one thing I hope everybody else will get onto it. I have a little bit of problem with the stones, lining on the edge. I understand the reason why. I think when they lay them down, they should lay them down normally instead of just putting there, and they should not be over it, because I witnessed a woman walking her dog, and the dog did her business, did its in that area, and she tried to step on. It's too wide for her to step over it, so she stepped on these cobbles, tripped and fell. So I think either it's too wide or it was not firm enough, so it rolled. So I think that's one of the problems. I would hope they would do a better job.
Just to note there, we actually had someone recently where they tear a land, put in a new area where they removed some lawn and they lined the sidewalk with the cobblestones. And they reached out saying, hey, could these be pushed a little bit farther down into the ground and not movable? And we made that change for them. So I'll make that an emphasis with the crews.
Okay, let's have 2 more questions here, and then we'll move on. Go ahead.
3 items. In the fall, the leaves come down, and I asked people to leave them there because I think it'd make great mulch, and they're dedicated to blowing them in a truck and haul them away. And so my question is, am I right about leaving the leaves there, great mulch, and the weeds don't grow, and it's happiness and so forth? Number 2, is it to use pine needles cut in half as mulch? Is there a downside to that? And last, what nationality are you? That's a great name.
I'll start with the easy one there. I'm Finnish and Canadian, but the name is Finnish. But the majority of my is from Canada, though. So to answer those questions, they are supposed to leave some of the excess leaf material. If the area is extremely leaves, they do remove some of them, but they're instructed not to remove all. The reason they remove some is the fire danger that it presents when it gets a little bit that they start to pile up. Yeah. So it's kind of I don't know what happened specifically where your area is, but they might have done the wrong thing at times. So please call that into the desk if you see something like that, the work order desk. Say, hey, I want to find out what happened here. I think there's the leaves. It's along the similar lines where if it's an excessive amount of needles, they do have to come through for the fire danger reasons and remove some. But actually, from what I know, there's not as many benefits needles as there is to just normal leaves from trees.
John, very much for your excellent program as well as your evening hours, part of your evening here. My question is about the Creek tree removal permit process. Could you please talk about that, the tree replacement component of that, and maybe any comments about Rossmoor works with that system, and if it might be a hindrance, et cetera?
So it's not a complicated process. Submit applications to them. Recently, it's been almost this. Through all the emergency calls we've had, a lot of trees got removed without a permit because we saw that they were about to fall. The stands in those emergency situations that we have to take care of people's safety. But normally, when the weather is a lot more fair, I go out there with the arborist, whether it's from Warren, Hamilton, Brightview, Evergreen, variety of different people we use here, and with their knowledge and what I can there, because I'm not an arborist, but we determine whether the tree is a hat. I think most of the time we're looking for overall health. If we're talking about pine needles, often it's bark beetle infestations. We look at fluted bark and trees that don't have one main trunk. At that point, I write up an application to the city. A notice gets sent out to residents in the area that would see the tree and are affected by its removal. And usually takes around a month right now to hear back from them. Actually contracts with an arborist from an outside firm, someone in-house. Nowadays, it's a whole separate company that they work with. That person goes out, takes a look at the tree, and makes their recommended removal to the city. Most times I get things approved, but you do get denials at that point. And at that point, an appeal starts directly with the city, not with the contracted arborist. That's we can write our soppy letters or reasons why we think this is wrong, quite frankly, for the denial. So that can take 2 to 3 months entirely to get through. But oftentimes an appeal will get found. Now, the last part of that question is the planting. And this is more so on my end and the landscape reps end here within Ross. I do think it's something that needs to be a little bit more proactive on, knowing that, hey, we're removing a tree and starting to plan the planting season in the fall and winter to get trees in the ground. It becomes difficult for me to manage, one tree, the tree immediately after. So I think what needs to be done is as we move through the year, think of all of our removals and then plant a bunch of them, in the fall when appropriate.
Good evening. My name is John Walkinshaw. John mentioned earlier being involved in the oak seedling program. John has been a good supporter of the program, as well as Rebecca prior to him. We have probably 30 or 40 sites. We planted acorns a few years back, and they are growing. We would like to have more volunteers to help us on the sites. We hope to plant many more in the future. It's a range program. I was involved in the Walnut Creek program back in the late 90s, and there are trees in the Walnut Creek Open that are over 20 feet tall. So it's nice to be able to go hike by these sites, and gee, I was involved in getting this tree going. And if you're interested, you can walk on uneven terrain to the sites and help us maintain them. We certainly appreciate it. I belong to the hiking club, and my name is in the Rossmoor Walking Shore. So just think of walking. I like walking, so it's part of my name. And anyway, thank you so much for your support, John.
Okay. Was it? I forgot there was that sustainable Rossmoor.
So thank you. That was a great presentation.
I missed the whole presentation.
Great follow-up questions.
But I got the questions, and I got
a couple of other questions on the
send my
Zoom.
questions in.
John, I'm
comments.
going to be forwarding them. If you're
I kind of
able to
blasted.
answer them, that'd be great. But we're going to move on our program. Okay, so because of the time, I'm going to skip the next part if I'm able to get. let's see. Well, let me. Okay, so this Earth Day feedback. Had a survey that 21 of you responded to. I'm going to skip right now. Certainly, if you have other thoughts, I know I've got a couple of emails from people having specific suggestions. We're always welcome feedback and would like to improve what we will do it better. Now I'd like to ask Pam to, I think it's Pam who's speaking to Legislative Committee, if not Carol, but okay.
For those who don't know, we've started a new legislative committee. Apparently in 2017, there was a group from Sustainable that did a little bit on legislation, were very successful with a bill. That's a picture of them at the lobbying. But since then, I don't think much attention has been to legislative efforts. And we decided that the best way to move the needle of climate change is through laws, regulations, policies. Our own individual actions are that we really need changes in legislation to do the things that really. So we are, I don't know how to make this move. Sorry. Technically challenged. Okay.
Just press that down button.
The down button. So we have started coming forward to the steering committee with environmental bills in the legislature that we could use our support or occasionally opposition. And we basically do a summary. We bring them to the steering committee and the steering committee decides to endorse them or not, at which point we send a letter to the legislative committees involved and Sustainable Rossmoor is in support of these bills. We've done about 14 so far this year, including a measure that would call upon the United States to join other countries' fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty, require state teacher and employee plans to divest from fossil fuels, enable the creation of pocket forests like lands, and require EV chargers to be publicly accessible universal connectors. So those are just a few of the ones we've done so far, and we're letting the legislature know how we feel about those issues. It's a new committee, and we've got a few people involved, but we're always looking for more. And if you'd like to contact me, you don't need to have legislative experience. We can teach you what you need. We're going to be scheduling an orientation soon for the members that we do have, and the legislative process, and how we decide what bills we're going to follow, and process is once we decide on those bills. So please join us. We'd love to have.
So thank you, Pam. Two things about that and exciting. One is that when you go to the legislator's website or on a bill, they frequently list all of the organizations sponsoring the bill or endorsing it. And so you see Rossmoor's logo, that little logo up there on the top left, next to the Sierra Club, next to all these other big organizations. So it makes me feel about 12 feet tall to be next to those organizations. But anyway, that's a nice part of it. Oh, sustainable newsletter, Pam, that's also you. Yeah.
We've put out about 8 issues now of our newsletter. It seemed like it would be a nice idea to have a weekly newsletter that lists everything in about what meetings are going on, what committees are working on, any other news that's relevant. And it seems to be pretty well received, but it's only as good as the information that you. So if you've got an event happening, send me an email, get it included in the newsletter. If your committee has met and you've got exciting news to share, want to make sure that people know what it is that you're doing, that would be great too. So have any questions about what should go in there, let me know. We don't want articles or, long graphs or anything, but a little blurb is always welcome, and people seem to really enjoy that and knowing what's going on a weekly basis.
Thank you, Pam. Again. Affiliation. I don't know. Marcia McLean, are you here or on Zoom? If you, let me just, if you can raise your hand, I can unmute you if you can't unmute yourself. Okay, well, I don't see her here, but so I'm going to move on. Okay, Walnut Creek Climate Plan, Karen, something you can speak to.
All the information is right there that you need. If you like images, I'll mention Walnut Creek used to be third. We have never been first in the county as far as leader in climate actions, even though you might think differently to hear our numbers. But we've now sunk to fifth, partly because we do not have a climate resolution, and we do not have a electrification ordinance for our building that would eventually get rid of natural gas. Other cities have done that, and those are the ones that are listed first. So Walnut Creek has spent over 3 years trying to get a climate action plan paid for. They spent over $250,000 for the first phase for consultants, almost as much for the second phase. And we finally have it online, and we finally can take another step of action. They've been asking for input as we went along, and so I just want to draw your attention to the top. It's pretty easy to remember that, -creek.org, and then departments, EEECO, like ecological or so forth. So that's the website that you would go to. Just start with the city of Walnut Creek and put in sustainability, and it'll also pull it up. You can read the 114 or so page climate action plan that the have done. But assuming you don't want to read all that, it has a brief synopsis and a meeting tomorrow night at 6 o'clock where an expert will go over it with us, explain, and take more input. But it includes everything that you might imagine, including some of the issues that were mentioned tonight. But it's really important that we take some steps. We'll be spending millions of dollars on this in the coming years. If you want your money spent, that's where you need to tell the city where to spend the money. So please join in. Something I want to go back to. Okay, Dave. A Spark is a program set up by the state for interns. They pay the stipend for an intern, belong to the city council to work with the city staff on environmental issues. And we have one. And I think in the past we might have even had two, but many cities, it has to be matched with some funds from the city. So other cities have more Spark turns than we do. I want to go back to what Pam said about the legislation. We'll occasionally get an email that says, call your senator. That's very important to do promptly, because often we only get 2 or 3 advance notice that a bill is going to come to a key floor vote. Pam mentioned is the divestment of the retirement from fossil fuels. And we know that our Senator Glazer has been waffling the issue. So we very rarely need to tell our Assemblywoman vote right. She always knows how to vote environmentally. But you will expect calls. We don't do that for for most of the bills, we don't ask you to get involved in an extra step. But when we do, it's going to be something that probably takes less than a minute, and it's very volume of people making phone calls. So I'd encourage you to do that. And it's also in the newsletter, so you'll see it in writing as a reminder if you in your newsletter, and unfortunately a lot of people are, or you'll, yeah, that's the main way you'll know. Okay.
Hold it, Carol. Don't go. Carol.
Yes, this month's film is called How Appropriate. We were just talking about trees. What you may not know, it just, when I think about it, it hurts me, pains me physically. Anyway, CAL FIRE has certain policies to take down million healthy trees out of our forests every year to thin the forest because they think it's going to reduce wildfires. There are experts that say it's going to do the opposite. More trees add moisture to the air and keep it cooler. But in any case, policy that's passed. So they take these healthy trees and they make pellets out of them from abroad to be burned. That's the carbon that trees spent years to be liberated back into the air. So the movie about that, and the citizens in Richmond, California, protested a number of times at the city council and at the city, and they have prevented those pellets from being shipped out from the port, Richmond Portman. Now they're going to out from the port at Sacramento. So the issue's not dead. That's the proposal. But anyway, you'll be about that, and the film tells more about the process and some of the civic action that's happening to try to prevent destroying trees, cutting them. People in rural parts, right? Yeah, have stoves, and even without pellets, you can still burn logs in a fireplace, and that was romantic. And now we just realize that that's greenhouse gases going the chimney.
Okay. So Karen asked about wood pellets being U.S. and yeah, and they are. Anyway, Karen, you're a former Zoomer, but you are not being the other Zoomers asking your question from there. Okay. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. Are there any other questions for Carol? Yes, we will. Okay. I'm going to skip about EV charging because mindful of the time here, and do want to have you mark your calendars 22nd at 1 p.m. Dave Feltz is going to be speaking at Peacock Hall here, 1 p.m. It will be recorded by Channel 28, so we'll be preserving this better than what I am able to figure so far, not very well, on how to get things well recorded in Peacock. I'll get there eventually, possibly today. Any other, the parting question then is for Roomers and Zoomers, rededicate yourself to sustainability for our grandchildren. Question that I ask myself on a not infrequent basis. So thank you. I guess I ended it a couple minutes early. Sorry, but anyway, thank you for coming. John was a great speaker. Thank you.